The keys are in that box.
First off, I would like to say this is my father's revenge and not mine. But it was one of his best. A little backstory to get you caught up. My father was a welder at a pulp and paper mill on maintenance with a union. There were around 500 people who worked here at the time. Mid to late 80s, on my dad's crew there was a man they called Squirrel because he would take anything small enough to carry and take it home. Some of the things were specialized tools made for a certain machine and they would have to be ordered in again at the company's expense. I guess there wasn't much the mill could do because somehow the union backed him. It wasn't long before my father's tools started going missing. He knew where to look and found them in Squirrel's toolbox and some scattered on his workbench. Squirrel was an average-sized man.
Around 5 feet 9 inches to 5 feet 10 inches, but my father was a huge man standing at 6 feet 5 inches and around 250 pounds, so Squirrel didn't say a word. He was too scared to. My father reported this to the union rep and the main office and was told they will investigate. Squirrel was given a 1-week paid suspension while the investigation went on. They found many of the missing things in his locker, lunchbox, toolbox, etc. Somehow he got the union to back him again and was allowed to come back to work at the end of his suspension. My father grabbed his mobile welder and went into Squirrel's area and welded together a giant metal box. He took everything he could identify as Squirrel's and put it in the box and welded a top on it. He said he used 5/8 stainless to make it out of. He then got the help of one of his work buddies to lift the box and Dad welded it to the bottom of the I-beam on the ceiling.
About 20 feet in the air. The day Squirrel came back he was looking for all his things but couldn't find it at all. He asked everyone he could but no one said a word except, "I take care of my tools. Maybe you should take better care of yours." This went on for a couple of hours until Squirrel went into the main office to complain saying someone stole everything of his. The shop steward and Squirrel walked into the maintenance shop to ask the people in there where his things were. Dad stood up and walked up close, and knowing him he was towering over Squirrel, and said something along the lines of squirrels like to climb to store their stuff. "Are you sure you didn't climb the I-beam and put your stuff up there?"
I guess the look of, "oh fuck," on the shop steward's face was almost too good, but the look of pure horror on Squirrel's face was my dad's favorite part of this story. He would laugh just as hard at every telling when he got to this part. Squirrel went into his work area and looked up. He saw the box up there. He tried to get anyone's help to get it down, but everyone seemed to have important things to do and can't at the moment. Squirrel took a day and a half working alone to get his things from the box and to remove the box from where it was welded. My father said not a thing ever went missing again and Squirrel worked there another 10 years or more until the mill was shut down. I can say I believe him because one night staying at his place I got drunk and was thinking about going home. He went to the basement and made a little box and welded my keys in it. I got them back the next day. I miss my father and his stories.
I hope this qualifies as pro. Nice story. My favorite bit. He went to the basement and made a little box and welded my keys in it. Your dad sounds like he was a fun guy.
This isn't pro revenge. This is tradesman revenge. Which is pro but with skill and finesse. Your dad is awesome.
I can say I believe him because one night staying at his place I got drunk and was thinking about going home. He went to the basement and made a little box and welded my keys in it. I'm a go home. Dad. You're too drunk to drive. I'm FFFFFFFIIIINNEEEEE. Hey. Where are my keys? Dad. They're in that box. Foo come on. Dodd. Too daring to use a angel girder.
Dad, if you're too drunk to use an angle grinder, you're too drunk to drive. I'll get some blankets and you can sleep on the couch. The next morning, thanks, Dad.
My father was a tool and die maker. He was fanatical about keeping track of his tools. His name was engraved on everything. I mean everything. Every tool had a designated spot in his toolboxes. And yes, He did an inventory at the end of every day. Shortly before he retired, the company he worked for was bought out by a much larger company. Well, one day about 6 to 7 new guys show up to be trained on various plant operations. They were all from Mexico. Apparently corporate had made the decision to close this plant, ship half of it to Mexico with the remaining part being split amongst various other plants across the U.S. So they essentially got the pleasure of training their replacements. Sometime on the third day after these guys arrived, my dad goes to retrieve his large set of calipers, but they were gone. While it wasn't uncommon for other employees to borrow stuff, they were pretty good at getting permission first because precision tools are very f***ing expensive. Anyways, my very perturbed father went in search of the missing tool. It didn't take him long to find that one of the replacements had borrowed it. Without saying a word, he grabbed it and marched back to his station. After quickly locking his stuff up, and he continued into the office to talk with management. Apparently, corporate had brought these guys in with the expectation that they could just borrow stuff from the other employees. While the plant did have some tools, mostly specialized stuff, each employee was responsible for their own stuff. In the end, they had to scurry to get tools for these guys to use, because no one would lend them theirs. I did something similar when I worked in a metal shop. It was only me, a foreman, and another guy the first worked with. We played all kinds of stupid pranks on each other. His favorite was to put a cup of water with a string tied to it on the top shelf of my locker so it spilled on me when I pulled the door open. He got me with that a few times and I let it go, laughing it off. One Friday he was out, I stepped the game up a little. I took the weld cart and ground a small bare metal spot on the top and bottom corner of his locker. I tack welded it shut. Then took some color-matched paint and went over the spot. After I dried, I took a Sharpie and went over the weld so the black line looked like the gap continuing between the door and the locker frame. He had to cut it open on Monday morning with an air grinder and cutting wheel. When I was working a welding gig, we had one crackhead who would constantly steal tools to sell for more drug money. A few thousands of dollars worth of shop tools had gone missing over time, and it finally came to a head, and the manager decided to punt this loser. In traditional fashion for this guy, he threw a huge tantrum, and while he was clearing his locker, he was firing stuff out the locker room door. Buddy Matt was hit in the side of the head with a flying screwdriver. Ow. He looked down. Oh hey, my screwdriver. I think the ratio effort-reward deserves the pro status. And I'm sure your dad would be pleased to know he entered the Hall of ProRevenge fame. Cheers to him. Your dad sounded like an incredible person. I'm glad you were able to share this story with us. I hope you have more life lesson stories you can share with us about him. Value them. Cherish them. Cheers.
All pro dad. He loved you a lot, Redditor.
What a nutter.
True, pro. Thanks. I always painted my tools pink, and stamped my name on them, never had a tool stolen since. Ha 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 ha. I love the little epilogue at the end where your father continued to solve problems, though the power of welding them inside boxes. A great story. My dad was a welder and had some good stories as well. One time he had a sore hand and I asked him about it. He smirked and started telling me it was because of the basement suite he rented with some other guys while working out of town. Huh? Well, he says, we work all week and all head home for the weekend, but the upstairs is rented by a few young guys who are there all the time. Okay, Dad? Well, The young guys like to have loud parties, so he asked one of them if they could have their parties on Fridays and Saturdays because the old guys downstairs needed their sleep. The young guy said, "Fuck you." So after he hurt his knuckle on the young guy's face, he pointed out that if they would like to play it that way, he could have a half-dozen millwrights and welders down there in an hour to help them all move. Ew. The young guys decided that saving the parties for the weekend was a much better compromise. My father the diplomat. Unions sound great until they only support the most useless person on the job. Your dad sounds hilarious. He sounds like he'd be friends, enemies with one of my coworkers, whose first instinct is always to break out the angle grinder. Legendary, more than just pro. According to local legend, there are several houses in my old mill town made up of pieces that could fit in a lunchbox. Generally, if there's welding involved, then yes, it's ProRevenge smiley face. One of my friends is a welder and he's very good. I personally think some of the stuff he does is art.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Aircast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.